What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to talk about something very important about the market. I'm going to talk about Apple's earnings and break down something very huge that's going on with SPY and many tickers out there. But before I break anything down about all these different levels and talk about something huge, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon in just 2 weeks, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Anyways, looking at SPY right over here, you can see that this thing is currently trying to get a nice bounce. Got a very nice bounce off that 447 support, and now it's currently testing the 449 area. But here's the thing about this: even though we did see the market continuing to respect this downtrend, it is trying to break out of its falling wedge, but there's no confirmed breakout just yet. Now, it is making an attempt to do so, but we don't have any confirmation of this being the true move. And the reason for that is because we have a very big catalyst that's going to affect how the whole market moves. That's going to be Apple's earnings. So after the market closes today, we have Amazon and Apple coming out. Okay, Apple's going to be the big one. And right now, Wall Street's expecting some good stuff for Apple coming down here. We can actually see they're expected for another pretty decent amount of revenue. We are anticipating another third consecutive year-over-year decline in revenue, but the expectations are still expected to be met. We're expecting them to meet these expectations nonetheless. The revenue of about $81.7 billion. This is according to Wall Street. The EPS of $1.19 per share. iPhone revenue of around almost like 40 million, and the rest of them are just listed below. So we're expecting some good earnings. Good earnings are not everything though, because it's also going to depend on guidance. What does Apple tell us about the next 6 months, next 2 months, next quarter going forward, the next year? All of this information is going to be very big during the earnings call, so make sure you are prepared for this. Now for the market, and this is why I'm bringing up this falling wedge, there's no confirmation or guarantee it's going to play out how some people are thinking it may, because there are fake outs all the time, and we have to remember what affects the market more. Even if the market was forming a falling wedge and getting ready to break out like this, what if all of a sudden the next day there was some very bad piece of news that comes out, right? The market could still sink despite this formation. That just goes to show that we shouldn't solely trade based off this. We have to be open-minded to what's about to happen. So if Apple, hypothetically, okay, let's just say Apple ends up announcing their earnings, they end up missing, or they meet earnings, but they end up giving us weak guidance, right? Either weak guidance or they miss on earnings. We could still see something like this play out where the market ends up, maybe it holds up for today, but then eventually, it ends up sinking down, gapping down tomorrow, and it ends up coming right like this, back into this wedge down here, and it just continues to trade down here before getting a breakout later on, right? That's another possibility for the more bearish case if Apple ends up not doing too well for earnings. And you always need to be prepared for this just to be safe. This could be a false breakout. There's one possibility about that. Or you could redraw the wedge like this if you have to. Now, what if Apple does something different? What if Apple ends up surprising everyone and they end up actually... They don't just beat on EPS and revenue. They don't just meet their iPhone revenue and things like that, but they simultaneously say, hey, the next 6 months are going to be very strong. They do some kind of buyback. They announce that they're going to continue to grow, and they expect strong growth for the next year, the next 12 months. Hypothetically, if Apple makes announcements like that, right, this is what you're going to be expecting. You're going to be seeing basically the market could kind of trade around this range for a little bit longer for Thursday. And then this could be a confirmed breakout where we don't even get a back test here. Instead, we just start pumping going into tomorrow because Apple ends up doing well with earnings, and Amazon as well. And the market just holds up quite nicely. This is another possibility where we see a lot of shorts get squeezed and they do something that's unpredictable, right? So this is another possibility for us to get a back test or get very close to a back test and then a break instead of breaking back down into the falling wedge. So I'm just trying to say this falling wedge, it could still be valid, right, for us to either re-enter it, retest it, or maybe just get a bounce off of it or do anything like that. So those are all just real possibilities. This could be a real breakout that's starting. And the truth is, I'm going over all these possibilities because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't promise anything because it all depends on Apple's earnings. All right. It all depends on Apple's earnings. And also what happens with Amazon. We also have some unemployment numbers coming out for the morning tomorrow, but I just want to make it clear I don't truly know what's going to happen. It's very hard to predict. And for that reason, I actually closed the large majority of my short positions on SPY like way down here when this thing was forming a bullish divergence. That was a good time to exit those positions. I exited a lot of those positions, if not all, basically all of them. Way down here, I slowly exited more as we started pumping a bit. And now the question is, could the market end up bouncing or not? I really don't know, and I find it risky to try to hold anything overnight because it's kind of like a bet on Aapl. If you're holding calls overnight, you're betting that Apple's going to help the market pump. If you're holding puts on like SPY, for example, you're kind of betting that we might not see a nice bounce tomorrow. The market may continue to sink. I don't know what's going to happen because this is just one day. If we get this bounce, it does not mean that we're going to go all the way back up to 460. It could just be a temporary bounce before we continue lower in the future as well. But this is just one move based off Aapl, which could just be for tomorrow before things change for next week. I want to make that as clear as possible. Okay. I don't know what's going to happen, and the best thing to do is to manage risks and be very careful. Because I don't know what's going to happen, I closed out my positions, the majority of my options, my trades, I've closed them, and I'm just going to wait overnight to see how it goes, and then try to trade intraday for scalping as well. All right, so say whatever you want, that is your choice. I am still holding shares, of course. Please don't take that the wrong way. But for SPY, we're going to be watching our resistance now at this 449.8 level, and above this, we have like 449.98, very close to our 200 EMA. Very close to 450. And for support, you're going to be watching 449.5. Below that, we have 449.26, 449 flat, and etc. So we're going to be watching these levels very carefully to see which way it goes. If we end up breaking below 449.5, you're going to be watching for a retest of these support zones. If it breaks below 449 specifically, we could come all the way back down to 448.5. So there's some very, very tight ranges on SPY. Specifically, if you want to just look at it like this for scalping. And then moving forward, for the IWM, we saw a very similar move, a very nice bounce off 193. We're currently testing the 200 EMA. If we could break this, you're going to be watching this thing try to like fill this gap up here, this 195.5 area. If it fails to do so, and we get this rejection off to 200, we could be watching for a backtest of about 194.5 and potentially even 194 again. Always look out for previous resistance becoming support around this 194 area for the IWM. For Tsla, we got a small bounce on it. It wasn't really that crazy of a bounce. It was still like pretty decent. We're only up 0.7%, which is not bad. We bounced off about 251 retests. We retested our resistance at 257.74, very, very close to that area. It ended up actually rejecting off 257.5, and then we came right back down, all the way back down to very close to our support at 252, and then we've been trading sideways since. So if Tsla continues to sink down, you're going to be watching it just continue to range trade around this like 255 area, and I think the odds do favor that, just very sideways price action. The volume is slowing down on Tsla, so it's not making any crazy moves unless we get some kind of news. For now, this is all it's doing, and I think it's just going to get ready for some big earnings that are going to be coming out soon. And then for Aapl, it's just continuing to trade sideways. This is exactly what I was predicting, trading sideways around this like 192 area. It is still doing that, so I don't really see anything too crazy going on with it. Could get an end of the day push to about like 192.5 or so, but nothing too crazy as it's still very range bound and very tight between 191.3 about 192.5. The low of the day was just barely below that, around 190.8. Looking at the triple Q, this thing actually has turned green. It came down to our support at 372. And I told you if this broke, this thing would come all the way down to 370. We didn't actually break 372. We actually bounced off of it. And now we're currently testing our resistance again at 375. If that could break, right, we actually came up to fill this gap right here. If we do manage to break this, and we're going to be watching this thing make its way up to about 376 as the next resistance zone, then we have 377.5. But for now, I'm just going to be watching this thing range trade for the time being, watch support and resistance, and be very, very patient moving forward. Looking at Nvda, we were looking for this thing to get a backtest of this 430 area, very close to 430. We actually came down, 433. We came down to 436, a little bit higher than that, just a little bit higher before this thing got the bounce. And for now, it's holding up quite decently, but don't forget the big move is going to come depending on what happens with earnings. Now, we have a potential bullish structure that is developing on Nvda as of right now. Right? It's forming like a bullish triangle. But when earnings come out, that's going to dictate which way this thing ends up moving. If earnings cause the market to sink, you're going to be expecting Nvidia to come down to about this 440 area. Break below that, then we have 436 and 433. If earnings help the market pump going into the end of the day, if not tomorrow, we could see Nvidia pump for about 455. For now, just be open-minded, watch your resistance levels, look at how this thing is like getting very tight right now. A big move is going to be expected, so be very prepared for that. And finally, before I end the video, looking at Meta, it's very flat right now. You could see Meta is still just trading sideways in this range. I was thinking we might see Meta retest like 309. We actually did that right before the market opened. And then after that, we got a bounce. So our next resistance was around 312.5, and we've been trading sideways since. You could see it came very close to 316. Once again, trading sideways around this range. And now the question is, how will Meta move? Well, this will depend heavily on what happens with the big earnings. And I just want to remind everyone, look, I can't give financial advice. I can't make any promises. Okay. I don't know exactly if the market will keep breaking out or the market's going to get a big rejection. The market is showing some strength. It looks optimistic for Apple's earnings, but always be prepared for this. All right. There are two possibilities. We either come right back down into this wedge because Apple could potentially like miss, or their guidance may not be very strong, or Apple could set the market up for a nice squeeze for tomorrow. Will it be like a massive squeeze? I wouldn't necessarily count on that, but it could be a decent sized one, right? We could pump a couple of dollars to the upside on SPY, a few points up. So whatever happens, happens. We can't really question it. We can't really argue. The market does what the market does. All we could do is manage risks and react. You know that tomorrow is going to be hard to predict. You know that right now. I'm telling you right now. So make the move of your choice. If you want to bet on one direction, if you want to bet on the market pumping, it's really your choice. If you want to just like close your positions and hold it overnight, that's also your choice. Be aware of the risks. Be aware of the risks, excuse me, guys, and do what you have to do. Thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular day and watch all these different levels. Thank you. Market to the moon as the long term is very bright, and peace out.